Members of the council, unique special sessions, work session da ida na khafte di no e neni kyo kunzata ko jishan antai akoko kodo e atsanat na hashne dole a large nini economic development beniye fan khade la person de deepness nigo what ego 21st council economic development committee November 17th of 2009, the exact date, that's when we started the discussion on this economic development financing plan. So, Division of Economic Development, the regional office, the Chaco home non-nation Chaco, but that we don't ask innocent that we not able to start a business. To put summer of 2010, that's economic development plan, the 5-year plan that is required of the Economic Development Committee to establish all of this happened under the leadership of my another Mel Begay, a chair of subcommittee, Division of Economic Development. Shiaj Rain Napa, you see Yego Yiniyet Khadija. Although summer of 2010, Ita Atwashed Exabo. Although Mark Grant, the investment committee, which is in Hako Jish. Nihika Jie, Kunza Oko Jish. Nihadet Njologo and Lego and Habik Airport Hiho. Ebekek Ahon that is neat. Naha or Sopot of the Dalfen hit the dog neat. Ostana H. End up a date, no. Audio Anhik on Hada Kama Nashish. No offense intended. I'm just telling it the way it is. Telling the truth. Do I say that? Okay, the cats are the dish. Have been here the Schnee, I shall the Josh and get out here. All the Hadi Kade are there a Bahashne. President Shelley that there, but that need there. The Etiana say close. Did Arbin that week up? He can't deal with. DNA. Dat eten. Daar is aarde. Of naast gaat ze bekend al eten. Aarde na het aangeet. Die ga ik die zie. Je hoort je gaat zien. Dat ga je op staan. Even dat je ado je is een banda nishiki. Ado ashoya. Anaskides nasli. According to Kodoni controller Yego Kiva Musi. Did art if did art that of leaf credit rating don't hard or need. Even not your best or work here. John in his knees trustedly. I had the credit rating is that kind Hato Badne. I don't his neither. I hasn't got a connect. Nihide she got certainly with their assistance. What I question it on it. I don't Jonago now was not at the next day. I don't she be behind so be on high nanash credit rating but. Jado Eben yen not as there, New York City go. Ita should send in a letter to the bay not in the table. I just show Ado, New York go at Sayada. According to speaker names, though, President Shelley, though, Mr. Grant, kondas kai ada shi khana ndas nesli na che really nigin nihich olia ado koden khna honne ado kadna kede da moda zerche da na de nipi ado khna da hoile according at ya ashlago division Ebik as Resources and Development Committee. Because I've narrated all that the neck in Nata, a aunt and a doctor, nothing issue in his dasne. Ko and das equip so other option than his nego and his dasne selling. Oko a baban see case or a quair, Bidoshi, Yatsedes case, she asked Lenigi Mark Grant. Diederheid asatje is hitot zot ant de asa de yata nats husband beso be okay digi is hitot zo be dot nitot yatses kes ande khalede in hitot nit khaisha Division of Community Development aje dot plans upgraded tos ado Division of Transportation dot updated ja esha khaisha hitot zo asatje requested dot nit other besogi asachit nhato nihat no hata bodesta ako kwabon shish kodoshi yego yendash sto khano ke da khagi banawash atole Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Ms. Benali, Mr. Speaker, members of the council. Thank you for inviting us here to give you a report on the bond financing. You should have a document much like this in front of you. It has a bunch of columns and a bunch of projects on it. Hopefully you have that. That's what we're using, our basis for our formulation of our projects. You've probably seen this. It's been an ongoing project now for about 5 years. It's the 5-year economic development plan. And how it's progressed now is that we have gotten the bond rating. We have an A rating, which is investment grade for the nation. We can be improved. We are told that it can get to AA through certain provisions, and we are of the understanding that can happen, and Mr. Grant will tell you more of that when he gets a chance. But what we want to share with you is that on the first year of this document, you know, it goes 5 years. The first year is what we're chasing on the bond financing piece. In this next part, the bond financing is $100 million we're looking at. We are trying to supplement that with other funding resources to make it go to $250 million. Therefore, more projects can be put in there. The next step that we have in our list is next week, Tuesday, we are going to meet with the bank and the financing advisors of how to package these to get the best loans or the best interest for the Navajo Nation, and that is ongoing. And that's our next step. We'll have more information on after the 18th. We'd like to have another meeting with you on the 20th to go over what those are and how they are grouped. That'll be another milestone for us. But if you look at this document, you'll find that in the first column here, after the first year, it says $125 million. And we had a meeting last week with Ms. Benali, Mr. Grant, and Economic Development to see how this list is associated and appropriated into what is going to be the final version. And in doing so, we found that some of y'all out there didn't have any projects in your areas. And so we did make a list of that. Some have more, but those are the ones that are on the list now. So what we were trying to explain is that this is a working document. We should be further along with it next week when we engage the banks and the facility advisors. We will know more of how and they want to assemble the loans to us. So remember, this is a loan. It needs to be paid back. So in doing this, through the bond program, there's government loans and obligation loans, revenue generating and other things. So we'll explain that to you. The lines L, H, N, O, and P are the other financing sources that we are looking at. As we told you before, the EB5 program is something we are addressing now. We have just signed the agreements with the people to set that up on Navajo. That is ongoing. That will allow us to go from $100 million probably to $200 million with investment from foreign folks. That much being said, there's more to it that's coming down the pipe. And what we wanted to show, especially the budget and finance folks that talked to me and said, how are we going to pay this back, and keep them in the loop. So essentially, those are the avenues of payback we are looking at. There's certain areas, each project is broken out into those areas of who's going to put in money, where we expect it, how much we can get back, and how many jobs that we can provide for the Navajo Nation. So that much being said, if you have any more questions on this particular document, Mr. Nopok, who put this together, and Mr. Deswood, Pete Deswood, who've been working right with me with this, can answer your specific questions. I came in, of course, about 65 days ago, so I'm really getting a big education too, and they're having the most of it. At this point, if you don't have any other questions, I'll turn it over to Mr. Grant, and he can explain how the financial advisors will get involved. And we also have community development too. I guess you're going to get several of these, but from economic development, if there's no questions, we'll turn it over to community development this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Let me just take you to this handout that has Division of Community Development. Last year, we put a plan together, ICIP plan. It was presented to TCDC, and it was approved by that body, and then it got to the Navajo Nation Council, the 21st Council, last meeting, but before they could get to that document, lots of quorum and time just ran out. So there was a listing of projects into a 6-year plan, 5-year plan. So we extracted those projects, and we're talking about bonds. And when we talk about bonds, it needed to be construction ready or project ready. So this is what we extracted from that listing that went to TCDC, got on the Navajo Nation Council's agenda. Also, this is all the projects are listed on the ICIP coming from the chapter themselves, So we extracted what we thought were good projects. And these projects total 60 plus million. So the way to read it is going across here. What stage we're in. The planning, most of the projects past the planning, chapter resolution, surveys, and all that. What projects are in design stage. Construction. It has check-up mark. Like what Mr. Damon said, this is a working document. We're still in this, finalizing this document. So the other information that I have for the council is a question to Mr. Grant. A lot of projects are in shortfall status. So do we use that for bonding? That's one question. The other one is for renovation. Or is it So if we could get that answered, then we'll further finalize this document. The other question, a recommendation that I have is that within the last 4 or 5 years, shot 30 million from general funds to do capital out there. A balance of like 10 million, that's easy. 10 million, that's easy. The state of New Mexico, to free up their general funds when they bond projects. So if we bond within then maybe we can switch those general funds projects with the bonding. That way it gives us back the general funds money to do other projects. So with that, community development is proposed.
Thanks, Speaker. The honorable members of the 22nd Navajo Nation Council. What we are preparing to do on Monday is we have the Transportation Improvement Plan that we are going to be presenting to the Resource Infrastructure Committee. The Transportation Improvement Plan consists of all the IRR road projects that are on Navajo. And what we're doing is we're extrapolating all those that we may feel may fit into this bond initiative. And one of the questions that was brought up on the Indian Reservation Roads program is that allowable revenue stream to bond or leverage against? And yes, we did get clarification under the current law, which is 25 CFR Part 170, it is called financing under that law, and it is allowable to bond or loan against a revenue stream, which is the Energization Roads Program. Secondly, is that we also have the fuel excise tax program, which we generate approximately $10 million a year, $9 to $10 million a year for that. And what we're doing is we are now in the process of re-evaluating the road fund management plan. So those are the two revenue streams that we have as far as for this initiative. And then in addition to the Indian Reservation Roads priority list, we also have an internal priority list which consists of all the county road projects that are on Navajo. So we're extrapolating all that data, and we should have a list separated from both those two for this project. So that's what I have. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Good afternoon, good evening, members of the Navajo Nation Council. I have a handout that I have distributed to you, and it's kind of a short document. Most of the attachments are what make it seem thick. But the face of it says types of projects, and so I wanted to run through this with you real quickly. We have different projects here. We have the capital projects from Arbin Mitchell's group, and then we have the economic development projects from Albert Damon's group, and then we have the road projects from Paulson Chaco's group. And so these are require different types of funding. And so let's just start from page 1 here. Types of projects, capital improvement projects. This definition is listed at 12 NNC 810F. All projects requiring debt obligation or borrowing, any acquisition or lease of land, purchase of major equipment or vehicles with a life expectancy of 5 years or more. Number 4, major building improvements that are not routine maintenance expenses and that substantially enhance the value or extend the useful life of the structure. Number 5, construction of new buildings or facilities, including engineering, design, and other pre-construction costs, with an estimated cost in excess of an amount to be determined by the controller. Major equipment or furnishings required to furnish new buildings or other projects, the cost of which is above a certain amount to be established by controller. And then after that, we have economic development projects. These are not specifically defined in the Navajo Nation Code. These projects, they're commercial in nature, meaning that they're revenue-generating projects. They don't meet the definition of essential government projects. We'll come to that definition here shortly. The next one are the local government improvement projects. And this is in 12 NNC, section 870. These projects are non-capital projects. They don't meet the definition above under CIP. They're more personal in nature, such as power line extensions to a house, water line extension to a house, or bathroom additions for a private residence. The last one on that page is essential government function projects. This is more of an IRS definition, and projects have to meet this definition to be considered for tax-exempt bonding. Number 1, it must be traditional customary activity engaged in by non-tribal governments to serve their citizens, such as education, public safety, governmental administration, social services, public utilities, healthcare, parks, roads, housing, and public utilities such as water, sewer, gas, and electricity. It must not be commercial. The IRS defines a commercial activity to include almost every revenue-generating activity other than healthcare, utilities, and public housing. NTUA has received a favorable ruling that its utility services are all EGFs. In other words, they meet the IRS definition for essential government projects. The next item are the debt ceiling. these are things that we need to consider when we go out for bond financing. The debt ceiling is defined in two different areas. The first one is in the Appropriations Act. That's at 12 NNC 820H. And basically this is the 8% definition that we use when we calculate our debt ceiling. 8% of annual recurring revenue and long-term debt is what we use. And that's in that first paragraph there. The second paragraph comes from the Bond Financing Act. It's a longer definition, but it basically says the same thing. Annual debt service for long-term debt shall not exceed the sum 8% of annual unrestricted recurring revenue and, number 2, projected annual project revenue as calculated by the controller, and long-term debt shall not be authorized until the impact of annual debt service on the annual operating budget, including sinking fund contributions, has been analyzed and determination has been made that the debt service payments are in compliance with this section. And then the rest of that are just more definitions, and you can read that at your leisure. And so we'll turn the page to number 3. And what we have here on the second paragraph is I did some calculations on the borrowing capacity for the nation. The first one there is the general fund limit. And I used the number 140 million as the annual recurring revenues for the nation. That's just kind of an average that I used. If you take that number and multiply it by 8%, you come up with 11.8 million that's available for debt service. That's the amount that we would have to set aside from the general fund for debt service. If you take that 11 million and calculate it at 5% for 15 years, then the amount you can borrow would be 122 million. And this would require passage of the CIP plan. And this are all listed in the Appropriations Act at 12 NNC Section 800. And the implication of doing this is that it would reduce the general fund budget by the 11.8 million for the debt service. The second one that I did a calculation on is the Road Management Fund. These are basically the fuel excise tax transfers that are moved over into this fund. And I used a number of $9 million. That's just an average by looking over the past few years. Sometimes it's higher than that, sometimes it's lower than that. So if we took that $9 million and used it at debt service, as debt service, then kept using a calculation of 5% in 15 years, we could borrow 93 million for the road fund. And that doesn't include the other source of funding that Mr. Chaco was talking about. This would, it may require a amendment to the fund management plan for the road management fund. And I'm not sure, we'd have to consult with the Department of Justice on that. The implication on that is that it would accelerate the ability of DOT to pursue projects rather than waiting for the $9 million every year. And then the last calculation I did was on the permanent fund, and I used the number of $25 million of average revenue. And if you take that and calculate it at 5% for 15 years, then the amount that you could borrow would be 259 million. And in order to get this done, we would require that the Budget and Finance Committee pass the 5-year expenditure plan. And the implication on this is that it would reduce the growth for the fund. There's different types of financing that we can look at when we go out for financing. First one is the general obligation tax-exempt bond. This would require the full faith and credit of the Navajo Nation, and it's only for essential government function projects. The second one are general obligation taxable bonds, and that's the same thing, except these are non-essential government function projects. The third one are revenue bonds, And this requires that the project have a mature stream of revenues. And so the projects we have are all greenfield projects. They're, in other words, they're startup projects. And so we probably will not be able to look at the revenue bonding for that. Turning to page 4, our next one is TED bonds, Tribal Economic Development bonds. These are tax-exempt bonds, and retail is allowable under these bonds. I believe that the NTUA, the Navajo Nation Shopping Center, and Chaco have all received an allocation for this. And so that's one area that we'll be looking at, cooperation and collaboration with these other entities. The next one are the EB5. This is a source of funding that was brought to my attention by the Economic Development Division. And basically what it is we would receive a $500,000 investment from a foreign national. And the ability to ramp up this money is considerable. And so there's different ways that we would look at using this $500,000. If we leveraged it, it would be $500,000 debt service, or if we allocated it directly for projects, then it would be a $500,000 project. The next one are new market tax credits. This basically is the investor will invest funds into a project, and in return they receive a tax credit or a tax write-off that they can use. The next one is New Mexico Finance Authority, and this is just a source of funding, a low interest rate source of funding. And so it's always good to have something like this in your back pocket so that you can use it as negotiating. The next one are grants, and I'm not sure if the gentlemen here are exploring this area, but that would be a source of funding that would not require repayment. And then the last one is our loan guarantees that we would get from the BIA or the USDA or the EDA. I think, what did I put, DEB? That should be EDA. I was getting ahead of myself there. And then the legislative process, I wanted to bring that to your attention. The projects here are all going to require review and approval by the respective oversight committees. And depending on the projects and the area that the projects are in, it may require all committees to review it, or it may only require a few committees. But regardless of that, the Budget and Finance Committee will still need to review the projects and the bond issuance. And that's because the B&F Committee reviews all finance-related matters. And then lastly, if there's any waivers of sovereign immunity, if there's any approvals that are required by council, then it would need to go to council. The bond agreement will definitely need to go to council to have their approval. We are going to try for a bond that recognizes tribal court and tribal law again, and hopefully we're successful in that area. One way to address that is to look at a line of credit, a letter of credit to back the bond, and if we can accomplish that, then it would be a lot easier to receive tribal law and tribal court. And then behind that page there, I have a timeline, and this timeline starts off next week on Wednesday, May 18th. We're all going to be going to Albuquerque to review these projects line by line with our bond counsel and with financial advisors. And I don't see any reason why this meeting should be limited. And so so if you are in the area, drop by, and you can sit in on the meeting. The list here goes over a couple of pages, and I'm not going to go through every item here, but basically we review the project listing, and then we start putting together the bond agreement kind of at the same time. And so that when the bond agreement is finalized, we'll bring that to council for approval from council, and then we start what is called a road show. And if you go back to August 2nd, you can see where it says on-site investor presentation. This is where we take our bond and we go out on the road and we try to sell it to all the investors out there. And we have 3 days scheduled. We'll have the various investors lined up at that point, and we'll just make a presentation to them. Hopefully they'll buy our bonds. And then from there, we go to closing, which is on August 25th. And at that point, then we would receive the money and then issue the bonds to the investors. Behind that, then, I have a longer description of types of tribal bonds. First one on that is the tax-exempt essential government function obligations. And then halfway down the page, we have tax-exempt. These are the TED bonds, Tribal Economic Development bonds, and then the taxable bonds. And then behind that, I just put together a short amortization table, and just to give you an idea of the debt service payments and the amortization in 15 years. So, Mr. Speaker and members of the council, that is my presentation. If you have any questions, we'll be glad to address them.
Members of the council, I know you all have a lot of questions, but for too long we've been watching the dollar go off the Navajo Nation. I think this, especially the economic development plan, will address that. We are in hopes of bringing economic development to the Navajo Nation, not just in terms of jobs, but in services and goods that the nation can offer, and keep the people and the money at home. So this is an attempt to address that. And it will also pay for itself eventually, pay off the bonds for itself, and in addition to bringing revenue to the general funds. So it takes money to make money, and that's what this is all about. We need to accommodate our people so that we can keep the money here on the Navajo Nation. So we're open to questions. Thank you.